You're a pretty good friend with Dave, Christian too. Just don't be able to let that trial situation. How that he's just struggling with some of the challenges they have.
Good evening, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started tonight. First, I want to say thank you so much for coming this evening. Families here with us in person and those of you watching at home online. I'm so glad that you could join us for this Family Life event that on an important topic that I feel is very critical to parenting today. And I want to say a big thank you to Dave Wright and Lexi Brown, our Family Life minister, Family Life intern, Josh Wyatt, tech manager, and those for helping put this on this evening. And I think in every generation, we have problems, challenges that we face, and God raises up guides, people to help us navigate, guides to kind of help lead the way or show us different paths to take. And we live in the technology age. And in this age, God has raised up guides to help parents, families, churches navigate this frontier of tech. And we're so thankful that one of them, Chris McKenna, is here tonight. Chris McKenna is the founder and CEO of Protect Young Eyes, something he and his team have been doing for about 15 years now. Five years?
It's a multiple. 15 is a multiple of that.
15 divided by 3 is what I meant. 2015.
There we go.
2015. Since 2015, have been doing that and really investing in kids and families. And we're very thankful to have him here tonight. Would you join me in welcoming Chris McKenna? Chris, yeah, blessings to you.
Sound team, are we all set with my mic? Just want to make sure everybody online. Hey, online friends, glad you're with us. I was just trying to envision what technology I might have been using back 15 years ago, and MySpace or Zynga or something, whatever it might have been. But I'm so happy to be here, glad to present this information to you. See, friends, I come at this from a perspective that I love technology. I am not going to give you the presentation that's going to encourage you to go home and smash your child's iPhone. If that's what you wanted, if you wanted justification for all of your maybe harsh rules, you're not going to get that here. What you're going to get from me is a realization that technology is here to stay. Do you need me to?
Yeah, if you turn it, is it turned on?
Test, 1, 2.
There we go.
Hey!
There we go.
Rewind. All right, good. And so my hope is that all of you, whether you are here as a son or a daughter, or you are here as a parent, you walk out of here encouraged. We cannot bubble wrap ourselves from technology. We need to embrace it. And so for students who are here, my hope is that you have a slight appreciation for how difficult it is to be a parent in the digital age. This is all new to us. And for parents and caring adults who are here, my hope is that you have an increase in empathy for what it means to be a teenager growing up in the digital age. Because for as difficult as you think it is to parent in the digital age, I would argue that it's even harder being a kid. When you think of all of the pressures that exist online today, when you think of the constant stream of media, when you think of just the low-grade anxiety that you as an adult with a fully formed prefrontal cortex that can discern between some things that are good and some things that are not, and then you put that inside of a developing adolescent brain that is trying to deal with so many different competing emotions and neurologies and all these things going on, the chaos that that they're sensing in the world around them is magnified times 10 compared to what you are dealing with. And think about the past week. I mean, you talk about chaos, right? And so my hope, adults that are either listening online or are here in person, is that you walk out of here with a magnification of your appreciation for how difficult it is to grow up today. It truly, truly is. But I do want to go back. It was interesting to have that 15-year comment because it actually sets up, I want to show just a video that kind of does take us back a little bit in time, generational sort of view on what things used to be when we grew up and compare that to the way things are today. It's from a commercial from actually Nature Valley of all things. So I'm going to go ahead and play that now.
When you were a kid, what did you do for fun?
So we go blueberry picking, for instance. That's so cute. But it was true.
We grew watermelons, plantains.
I found an old sign which was big enough for me to sit on. It made a great toboggan. It was very slick and very fast.
I had a few fish in my basket, and I looked up on this bluff, and here's this black bear sitting there watching me. If he starts chasing me, I'm going to keep throwing the fish out of my basket until he's gorged and he won't bother me. And what did you like to do for fun?
You know, you go door to door, get a group of kids, and you play lots of games, hide and seek, just going out to the field and playing baseball.
And we built these massive forts, you know, the kind that you can actually sit in and play in, you know, with our friends. And it was just really wonderful.
So what do you like to do for fun?
Video games, definitely.
I like to go on my phone,
text, some email.
My favorite thing to do in the world is definitely watching videos and playing video games. Those take up so much of my time.
3 hours or 3 to 4 hours a day. Same.
5 hours straight.
Just last week, I watched 23 episodes of a TV series in less than 4 days.
I forget. I'm in a house, I have parents, I have a sister, I have a dog, I just think I'm in the video game, I completely get lost. I would die if I don't have my tablet.
Whenever I feel upset, I'd play video games and I'd feel normal. It's really wonderful.
When your daughters grow up, your great-great-grandkids, what do you think will happen if this trend continues?
It's scary to think that they'll never have to leave the house.
Cindy grew up doing a lot of the things that I did and enjoyed, and I see what my grandsons are doing today, and it's mind-boggling.
By the time they have kids, it's going to be a really different environment.
I actually feel a little sad because I feel like he's missing out on what's out there in the beautiful world.
Special connection with nature. I think it's innate in all children, but needs to be nurtured.
See, I think the pandemic has taught us a lot of things. It's taught us some things that I hope we never have to experience again, but it's also taught us some things that I think are really important. This is not an either-or equation when it comes to technology. I think what it's taught us is we lack balance. And I want us to try to discover the and, us and technology, relationships and technology, school and technology, and try to find a little bit more of that balance. That commercial isn't intended to make you feel guilty if you have a son or a daughter who loves YouTube, or guilty if they love playing Fortnite or any of that stuff. In fact, I would hope that you as a mom or a dad actually sit down and play it with them from time to time, or you watch videos with them from time to time, or you are okay being humiliated on the Switch and Super Smash Brothers from time to time. I invite those things because that's what I do. I no longer can beat my 9-year-old on the Nintendo. It's quite humiliating. But friends, I think what we lack sometimes is balance, because the Lord has made us to respond to real experiences in a way that technology just cannot replace. We've felt that isolation during the pandemic. We have felt that loneliness, right? That there's something different about a physical hug with another human being that cannot be satisfied if your face is on FaceTime and I rub it on my arm. It's just not the same. It doesn't release the same neural hormones in my brain that the Lord gave us to experience when we're in the embrace of a loving, caring person. There's just something different about interacting with the physical world. And my hope is that we walk out of here with this and posture of how can we embrace that reality about who we are in the world that God has made, and find a place for technology to come alongside that and not replace that. Not replace that. So what you see up on the screen is my reality, my family. We had the chance this summer when things were a little more opened up north to take a trip up into the Upper Peninsula, visit Mackinac Island. This is their Arch Rock with the pictures, well as I could get, all 6 of us in their little struggle. They're getting big. My humans are getting too big for dad selfie pictures. They're just bigger now. But this is us standing there. So I have a 15-year-old daughter. She's in 10th grade, Lauren. And I was just telling Mark that we just found out that today, There's enough kids at her high school, we're at Caledonia Public Schools, there's enough kids now with COVID-19 that as of tomorrow, we are now hybrid, where half of the 1,500 students are going to be in school on Mondays and Thursdays. The other half will be in the physical building on Tuesdays and Fridays, and everybody is virtual now on Wednesdays for them to clean the building. So life in the McKenna house is about to make a big change here, right? And then I have twin boys who are 10 and Blake, who is 9. My twins are Cole and Grant. And believe it or not, they are the young man who is next to Lauren, second from the left. That's Cole. And then his twin brother is the one in front of my lovely wife, Andrea. It'll be 21 years this month on the 20th. And his twin, fraternal twin with Down syndrome, is the little blonde in front of her named Grant. I didn't even know it was possible to have twins that were so different. Imagine our surprise when that's what the neonatologist told us, that we had twins who were all the way down to the genetic level were that different. And so my reality is one not that's just based on books. I don't talk to you about technology at a philosophical level. I talk to you about technology through the eyes of a dad who is failing and succeeding at probably the exact same rate that you are, with kids who are challenging me all the time, with a daughter who now has an iPhone and social media. Yes, we waited as long as we could, but I'm living in some of those realities. I'm watching the pressures she's experiencing. I'm watching my 10-year-old son, Cole, ask questions now as he sees students in his 5th grade class who have certain technology that he doesn't. It's just a fascinating time. So I'm in the trenches with you, and I hope that equalizes this a little bit. Yes, I get to stand up on the stage here, and the Lord has given me a platform, and as Pastor said, to be a guide in this space, but I don't do it from up above you. I do it with you, and so I invite you to ask a lot of questions. You're going to leave here with a lot of questions that maybe don't quite have an answer yet, and as you ponder in the days and the weeks to come, whether it's driving somewhere, whether it's in a shower where some of my inspiration tends to come because it's alone time, right, whatever that is, I want you to have access. Hopefully you grabbed a note-taking guide when you came in. Friends who are online with us, right, that you have access to us through social media, through DM, adults, that's direct message, ask your kids, email, text, whatever. There's a lot of different ways that you can get in touch with us because I want to be a resource here at Our Savior Lutheran as things change, because we're going to talk about things tonight that a month from now could be radically different than how they look right now, especially with the pace with which the world is changing today. And so that is my family. And some of the things, friends, that we are a part of is not just these presentations. We have a website that we spend a lot of time every single week keeping up to date, protectyoungeyes.com. That's a primary takeaway for you, where we're doing all of the app reviews, all the parental controls for different devices, all of these things, research. I'll be publishing a blog post in a couple of days about how teenage neurology is impacted by viewing pornography. We're doing this research so that you don't have to, because who in the audience or online has time? Anybody? Anyone? Because if you do, I want to hire you. It is hard to keep up. Even for me who loves this, it is difficult to keep up. And so we are trying to do that for you. In addition to that, friends, I have just come to believe that no amount of research, no quantity of blog posts at Protect Young Eyes is going to convince trillion-dollar businesses to care about you or your kids. Last year, on July 9th, 2019, I had the opportunity to testify in front of the U.S. Senate. This is a photo of it. My dad, you can kind of see him. He's kind of cut off there on the right. He came with me as my personal assistant. It was really kind of funny. He carried my bag for me. It was so nice. And I got to testify and talk to them. It was a hearing. There were 5 of us that represented different aspects of child protection online, and I got to testify about our research and what we have found. And in the time since then, we've been a part of writing some legislation that is now in the House and in the Senate, and we hope that in the 2 months now that D.C. is a slightly less noisy place. Who knows? There's so much happening, but we have a lot of work to do to try to get some legislation changed. Because, friends, here's the problem. We have a 2020 internet with 2020 predictive artificial intelligence that is being governed by laws that were passed in 1996. The laws that govern protection for you and protection for our children are no longer adequate for protecting them. And nobody is going to change anything until the regulations change. And so we are working tirelessly behind the scenes to get the laws changed so that trillion-dollar businesses treat us better. if they only cared as much for our children as they do for political censorship, we'd be in a much, much better place. And so, friends, that is a lot of what we're a part of. And I would invite you to join us because it is difficult to stay up. And we want to be a help for parents like you who care. And by the way, you see all that U.S. Senate swag on the table there, like notepads and pencils and those water bottles? As soon as the hearing was done, I took all of it. And I still have unopened U.S. Senate water bottles in the basement. And I just look at them from time to time, and it's only cool to me and nobody else. But anyway, in Scripture, we are invited to do a lot of things, and we've based our foundation on things that we find in God's Word that thousands of years later still applies to how we use technology today. But our foundation as an organization is that we believe that parents and caring adults like you who are observant, engaged, and informed often have young people who learn how to use technology well. It's not a prescription. I can't tell you to do A and B and you'll always get the same result. But I believe after 5 years and over 1,000 presentations that there are certain parents who have done certain things that tend to have a predictable outcome. And I'll share with you what that means through something that we call the digital trust framework that I think can guide the rest of our conversation for tonight. In Proverbs 22:6, we are invited in this way, right? Start children off on the way that they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. This doesn't say except when it comes to technology. There isn't an out clause just because you don't understand what your young people are interacting with today. It applies even to that. So thank you so much for being here because you have really jumped into this with 2 feet. It may have been a little intimidating to come, and you may not understand it all, but you've taken a step forward, whether you're here or online, to embrace what the Lord has asked us to do here, okay? And so 2 things you're going to hear me say pretty often tonight. One of them is this digital trust framework. I think that there's a continuum of parenting that can help guide us when it comes to being a parent or being a grandparent or being an aunt or an uncle in the digital age. On one end of the spectrum, if you see kind of over here on the left-hand side of the spectrum, right? My right, your left. You see where we can just totally annoy kids with our overbearing, fear-based, bubble-wrap parenting when it comes to technology. That is not where I want us to be. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the total avoidance side, which is, I don't care, they'll figure it out. It's no big deal. Let them click and watch whatever they want. They'll be fine. Neither side of that spectrum is where we want parents and caring adults to be. Again, after 5 years and 1,000 presentations and tens of thousands of conversations, I have found that in the middle is the sweet spot. These are the words that characterize parents and caring adults who most often have young people who learn how to use technology well. Copy me, meaning, do you want your sons and daughters using their technology exactly like you do? The number one complaint that I hear from teens is my parents tell me to put my phone down and they're more addicted to it than I am. Now, I know because I have a teenager that from time to time I have to say the things that Lauren tells me, I have to divide by 2 and multiply by 0.1 to probably get the actual message of what she's trying to say there. There's maybe a little bit of exaggeration in that, but if you're honest and you look in the mirror, probably not too much. Would you want your kids using it exactly like you do, exactly when you do, watching the things that you watch? That's what I mean by copy me. What I mean by co-play is doing what I alluded to before. How often are you actually doing technology with them, watching the YouTube videos with them, playing games with them? If our kids only learn to see technology as a me activity instead of a we activity, they're never going to trust you when something goes wrong. If the only interaction that you ever have with your kids when it comes to technology is what they're doing wrong with it and punishing them, then when something happens on the technology that isn't good for them, what is the probability that they're going to trust you with this situation? Do technology with them, and that starts by modeling it. And that then leads into having a curiosity instead of a condemnation attitude when you're working with them. Ask a lot of questions. There's a reason that when your son or daughter watched that video that you really didn't want them to watch, that they watched it. Instead of cutting off the conversation and being horribly disappointed, they probably feel bad about watching it already in the first place. What if you ask them a question? You know what, honey? I bet you don't feel great about watching that. Why was it? Like, be curious. What was it about that video that you just had to tap? I would argue that there is no better insight into the heart, into the mind, into the spirit, into the questions, into the wonderings, into the insecurities of the teens and the tweens and the young people that we love more than their technology. There's no better insight. But they're never going to talk to you about it if your attitude about it is always negative and is always punishing and is always what you hate about technology. Be curious instead of condemning. The fourth one is to have awesome, frequent, and open conversations. Talk to them frequently and openly and honestly about all of the awkward things that nobody talked to you about when you were a kid. If my mom was here, Nancy, and Mark knows her well, I would say the same exact thing because we laugh about it today. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I got one talk, and I was more confused afterwards than when it started. Anybody relate to me on this? Or am I the only one? Yes or no? Right? We didn't talk a lot about awkward things. We don't have that luxury in the digital age. We have a technology in the pockets of our young people that is constantly telling them things. Is your voice, is your message of trust, of curiosity, of authenticity, of understanding more frequent than that voice? Right? And then finally, we have coaching. I can't stand the phrase parental controls. I like parental controls because they do certain things that keep bad parts of the internet away from all of us. But I hate the phrase because all that it communicates is a war between us and our kids. My control versus you. And instead, what I want us to have is a posture of coaching. A posture of, I want to show you how to use technology well. I want to do this with you. I am rooting for you. I can't wait to see you use technology well. Why? Because I am your coach. I am your guide. I don't want to just punish you for this. I'm going to be open and honest with you about what this looks like and where the path of success is. And friends, if we only see it as a us versus them mentality, then they're going to treat it like an us versus them mentality. What if instead it was an us with them mentality? Instead of an us versus them mentality, okay? This is what I mean by the digital trust framework. In fact, we feel so strongly about it that we trademarked it. That's ours, that framework. Another thing that you're going to hear me say often is the router is your best friend. The router in your house is the number one most important device in your house. And so friends that are watching online, on the screen there, you're going to see a QR code. That's that little bar, square up in the corner that has the black and white squares on it. You can scan those that are on the screen with the camera of your phone, and it'll take you directly to the website of whatever it is I'm talking about. So in this case, it'll take you directly to the website where you can learn more about the Griffin router, which is the router that we recommend at Protect Young Eyes. And friends who have handwritten notes there, you're going to see on the very last page of your note-taking guide, I think there are 6 different QR codes there on the back. Is that true? Yes? Okay, cool. Same thing, where you can simply take the camera on your phone, hover it over one of those, and Safari or Chrome or whatever browser you're using will take you straight to the website for those items. That's what those are for. But the router is the most important digital device in your house. And unfortunately, we always social distance from it. We stay far away from it. Nobody cares about the router until it's broken. Hey, what's wrong with the Wi-Fi? Yeah, where does that router thing? It's behind the couch, right? This is the setup in the McKenna house. You can see the little Griffin router. There's 2 different types of routers that Griffin sells. We have the smaller one because we have a smaller home. It's based on square footage. And then next to it, that's the voice over IP for the actual old school VTech dial telephone that we have in our house because I wanted to teach my boys how to dial and order pizza. right? How to actually dial and call and do things. So we have an old school dial charge phone. It's hilarious to watch them push the buttons like, haha, right? But it's teaching them some valuable skills about interacting with others. That's the little black box on the right-hand side there, but that's our router. It fits right in my hand. And with that, I have control right here from the altar here in Lansing to shut off the internet on 13 connected devices in my home right now because it has an app and all these things. Now, I've never had to do that, but my kids know because they help me set it up. That's a part of this coaching. It's not me against them with a router that's trying to make their life miserable. It's me with them because you know what, guys? We're going to put this router in over here by the table. Why? Because there's things that Dad doesn't need to see either, and it's going to block all the junk because we don't need porn and you don't need it. And this was an us activity. This was like a family event to put the router in. So they knew the reasons behind it. Again, me with them, not Dad versus them. So understand your router. It is your most important digital device in your house, and you probably don't even think about it. Now, the one you see up on here, that's only $99. It's not that much when you think about things that we spend our money on. The taller one for larger homes is about $210. Again, pretty reasonable, okay? In fact, this is a viral post during the beginning stages of COVID-19. There was a family in Australia, and they have 3 children. And they asked their children if they wanted to go out for a day trip, right? Just a walkabout or whatever they were doing. And 2 of their kids were complaining, like, oh, that sounds so boring. We just want to stay home. So the parents were like, well, we're not going to leave you home just to be online. So they took the one child who wanted to go with them and their router/modem with them on this trip. And they proceeded to take pictures of modem in all of these wonderful, beautiful places, eating a sandwich, drinking a Coke at the beach. And this post just went viral. And it's hilarious if you read the small print there. It said, yeah, it was great, other than our one son who was mortified that we kept taking pictures of our modem in various places. Modem had an excellent day. It is the most important digital device in your house. And so we've tested a lot of different devices. Again, this is our blog post. You're going to see slides like this from time to time that are images from our blog, protectyouringeyes.com, and in the menu across the top, you'll see blog, reviews, presentations. This is what you would find there. You can search for keywords. I think you have some of the titles there in your note-taking guide. You can go to the website at any time and just search, and that's the title that will come up. And you can see our testing and why we concluded the way that we did. You know, friends, routers are one of those items that people are really, really afraid of. It's really interesting to me. Don't be afraid of your router. You don't have to understand it. The ones that they sell today, like Griffin, maybe some of you are familiar with Circle, which is a device that sits next to your router. We also talk about that one in that blog post. There's others that are out there. It's the most important device that you have in your home. Now, if you have questions later on, I'll have a break here in just a minute. If you have questions about the router, no problem. The digital reality that we live in today, friends, is that too many parents, and oftentimes too many Christian parents, suffer from what I call the NMK virus. And that is the not my kid virus. Don't fool yourselves for a second that even students here at Our Savior Lutheran are immune from the pulls of the internet. Yes, good, Jesus-loving kids are pulled into all kinds of horrible things online. Because as you'll hear me say in just a little bit, friends, we are now confronted with not just technology, but what I would argue is a lowercase g, God-like technology that knows us better than we know ourselves. How many of you have seen the documentary on Netflix, The Social Dilemma? Raise your hand. Okay, a couple of you. I would invite you to watch it. It's a little bit over-dramatized in places, and I can't see hands up that are online, but I would invite you to watch it. It does a really good job of explaining this predictive technology that knows exactly how to get you hooked on the things that you like to do online. And when you look at the average monthly users of some of these platforms, I'm a numbers guy. I was a CPA before I got into internet safety, and so numbers help me make sense of the world. And when you look at the usage, it's just mind-blowing, right? King YouTube, 2 billion monthly average users in that application. That is a crazy number, isn't it? double the amount of Instagram, which is about 1 billion. And then you have TikTok, which is, quote, only, 8 to 900 million. And then Snapchat, which gets all the news because of the things that can sometimes happen in Snapchat, but only, 3 to 500 million monthly average users. That's a lot of people that are using these applications every single day. So there are 5 different large topics. Friends, there's so much that we could talk about. I would love to make this a day-long presentation, but we're going to just cover sort of 50,000 foot over 5 big topics here that are broken down in 5 sections there, either online or here in person on your note-taking guide. I'm going to have a couple of breaks here after each one to ask if there's any questions here in person, and then I think Josh is going to relay to me if there's any questions from anybody online. But these are 5 big areas that no matter where we go, whether it's in Michigan or it's not been a lot of travel, but when we used to travel, we did hundreds of presentations all over the country. I would hear some of the same things no matter where I went, right? We have a lot of the same questions. And so you can see them up there, right? We're going to first talk about what's going on inside of the brain, then we'll talk about screen time, then we'll talk about mental health, we'll get in a little bit of pornography, and then into predator risk, okay? So number 1, let's talk about the brain. Oh, the brain, the most fascinating machine ever created. And for all of its complexity, it actually operates under a very simple principle. But what's going on inside of the adolescent brain is something that every single parent needs to understand. That during adolescence, the brain goes through a massive rewiring process, creating billions of additional neurological connections. And then through a process of use it or lose it, the brain winnows away those neural pathways that are used least frequently, and then solidifies or myelinates those neural pathways up into the 20s of young people, so that by the time it's done with its formation, it has shaped itself into a more efficient organ for adulthood. In other words, God has created our brains in a way that based on our experiences and our genetics and the things that are just going on around us, right, our circumstances, we have a brain that uniquely shapes for each and every one of us. But after adolescence, the brain will no longer shape and develop at the rate in which it does during adolescence. That's the last great growth spurt when it comes to what happens neurologically. It is fabulously complex and also marvelously simple. Because for all of its complexity, the brain operates under a very simple principle. Whatever I feed my precious brain is what it learns to love, especially before age 15. And friends, what you need to understand, especially as parents, is that the brain doesn't just do those things that I described, but the front of the brain, there's a part that is called the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is what allows us to discern what things are good and bad for us. It's the brakes of the brain when you're confronted with this maybe fabulously exciting but horribly dangerous situation. That's the part of the brain that allows you to apply a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of experience to go, maybe I should or shouldn't do that. That is the last part of the brain that develops. The brain develops backwards to front. Therefore, why in the world do we get upset when we put a supercomputer into the hands of our teenagers and we put Snapchat in front of our teenagers and we get upset that they make bad decisions? Neurologically, they don't stand a chance. Friends, we have to be really honest and say a lot of this is our fault. Because if Snapchat was around when a lot of you adults were in high school, half of you would be in prison right now. Right now, Mark is remembering some of our stories of growing up together. He's like, oh yeah, I'm really glad that thing didn't exist back then. Mark and I go back 35 years, just FYI. We can share stories later. But friends, let's be honest. When you think about some of the things that we experienced, there were all kinds of physical barriers of time and of distance that prevented us from doing horrible things. If I wanted to radically change the trajectory of my 15-year-old life back in whatever year that was, 1989, I had to have a plan I had to have a flow chart. I had to have a purpose. I had to have all of these things in place to figure it out. None of that exists anymore. There are no more barriers. And so when we put these devices in the hands of our kids without the proper training, without the proper guidance, without the proper coaching, and they make mistakes, I'm sorry, that's your fault, not theirs. When you understand what their brain is going through, I think it gives us a much greater understanding for why they do the things that they do. And so when parents have talked to me and they said, you know, my kid told me they didn't know why they did that, I look at them and I said, they're exactly right. When a mom called me and told me that her 11-year-old son had been watching tons of pornography and said to her, Mom, I don't know, I just couldn't stop clicking. I said, Mom, that's exactly right. Neurologically, he has no brakes. It doesn't make sense to you because your brain is fully developed. His is not. I hope that things like that increase our empathy for what it's like to grow up today. Increase our empathy for how difficult it can be to be confronted with some of these temptations. So these are some things I want us to also keep in mind when it comes to the brain. Again, always keeping in mind the relational side, that digital trust framework, but some additional things that are important when it comes to understanding their brain, okay? Those are what you see on the left-hand side there. So some bonus items are to amp up the empathy. That's what I was just talking about. The second one there is to maybe create a digital trust code of conduct, right? Where you can decide what things are allowable and whatever rules apply to them probably should apply to you too. If you say that as a family, our teens shouldn't have digital devices in their bedroom after a certain hour, then guess what, Mom or Dad? You probably shouldn't either. You're going to find something different other than watching Sunday Night Football to fall asleep or playing Candy Crush or whatever it is. If you're telling them they can't use their smartphone as an alarm clock, then you can't either, right? Whatever this needs to look like, understand that if you want to create trust with your sons and daughters, then you have to do it with them. And these are some things that you can decide in this digital code of conduct if that works for you. And there's a lot of different examples that are out there. We just actually finished one today that I'll be sending out to people that follow us. Number 3 there on the list is to avoid the toxic trio. We've done surveys of teenagers and we have found that there's a common set of 3 things that are almost always present when kids make bad choices online. And I would argue that whether you are 14 or 40, when these 3 things are present, that you are in a greater place of temptation when it comes to bad digital choices. And that's bedrooms, darkness, and boredom. When those 3 things are present, you just find yourself in this near position of sin that we just should not be in. And as a man who struggled for years with an online addiction that did great harm to myself and to my marriage, I can tell you that that is the truth. There's something about being online that night where everything can be rationalized, whether you are 14 or 40. So just be careful. I think the toxic trio is something that we need to be aware of, and that's what you see on the screen here, okay? And the 4th and the 5th ones up there are then to have tools in place to monitor. Some families have found Bark to be a great tool to monitor social media. Again, whatever works for you and your family. It can be plugged into different social networks. If that works, great. Again, back to the router. The router is the most important digital device that you have in your house. It can help with some of those digital rules, whatever they might be, as a part of that code of conduct, right? It can help with screen time, which is what we're going to get into next. So I'm going to pause right there in terms of brain and that kind of development. Are there any questions from anybody here in person? I'll repeat it back so that everybody online can hear the question. And then Josh, I'll ask the same thing for our online audience. If there are any questions that anybody has about anything that I've said so far, go ahead and ask first here in person. Is there anybody? Just to take a quick pause? No? All right, online, anything there that people have questions about?
One of our high school students asks the question, do you think that temptation plays a big role in clicking on the wrong thing?
So a student asks, do I think that temptation plays a role in clicking or tapping on the wrong thing? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that the way in which technology creates opportunities to click and tap on anything, makes it tempting to click or tap on anything. And one of the great lies of technology is that nobody will ever know. That's coming back to that toxic trio, especially at night, maybe especially, in the dark, in the living room, in your bedroom, wherever it is. You start to believe that little lie, that little lying voice that says, go ahead and click there. No one's going to know. You're not hurting anybody. It's just you and your screen. And that is a toxic path. And so absolutely, I think that temptation ramps itself up with those little voices, and we just have to have all kinds of exit points, or I would say just never be in a place where we're on that path in the first place. Find a different trailhead, okay? Just don't ever go there. So definitely, I would say the answer to that question is yes. Anything else? All right, we're going to keep rocking and rolling. And again, we're going to, if you think, now I've got a question about that topic, you can ask things out of order. That's no problem. The next topic here is secondhand smoke in screens. Earlier this year, USA Today put out this article that referred to screen time as the new secondhand smoke. It was a really well-written article from a woman who studies child development and also speech development in young people. Friends, there's a reason why you play just tons of patty cake with your young developing toddler. They see your face, and by seeing your face and your facial expressions and just this craziness you're so excited, and patty cake, yay, they clapped and they smiled, and there is so much going on in that interaction with young people. It's more than just a cute game. It is teaching them how to relate to other people, how to pick up on social cues. They learn so much from the face of their parents and their loved ones. If you go to YouTube, there are experiments out there that look at what happens when a parent is interacting in a loving, caring, just very engaged way and then turns away, be it on a screen or something else. And they set a timer and they watch the anxiety and the posture of this child just increase. Why aren't you looking at me? Wait, pay attention. Increase, until they're just beside themselves. And then the parent immediately puts it down and looks back at them, and it's like a switch. They're like, yay. I'm good again. When we are constantly depriving our developing young people from our face because we're stuck in a screen, we are depriving them of development, of key developmental opportunities from interacting with us. So we just need to be aware of that, right? If you want to find it, this is that article there, right? Communications time bomb. Parent smartphone use could be the new secondhand smoke, okay? And when you look at all the different studies that are out there, and there's a lot of different studies, whether it's from the World Health Organization or pediatric associations, they have a lot of different things that they say. But when you look at all of them next to each other, they all come down to three things in common. Number one, they say that children ages 0 to 2 should have almost zero sedentary screen time. Almost zero. Now, this is not me trying to create, any kind of guilt. If you as a parent, whether you're at home as a mom or a dad, whatever you are, if the only way, that you can get a shower is by giving them 10 minutes of Peppa Pig on the iPad, go for it, okay? Your sanity as a parent is more important in that moment, okay? But what I want you to take away from this, that as a general practice, using blue light screens as a digital pacifier is doing kids great harm. Number two, what all the studies say is that wherever you're at today, less is always better. Whatever number you're at, less is always going to be better. And then number three, what they say is what I've referred to before in that copy me part of the digital trust framework, is that the way in which parents and adults in their life use technology is one of the greatest impacts on how they learn how to use technology. They're watching us constantly, okay? Again, back to that question, would you want them using their digital devices just like you do? A couple of years ago, we were at a charter school over in Grand Rapids, and Rose Crawford, one of the presenters from my team, she was in front of a group of second graders. Now, teaching internet safety to second graders is just a blast. They love telling you about Dude Perfect and cat videos and fail and all this stuff. They love telling you about all of their favorite videos. At the end of the presentation, there was a young boy who came up to Rose after she was done, and he was crying. And she was like, oh no, like we do not want the outcome from our internet safety presentations to be crying kids. It's really bad for business, okay? But he said through tears to Rose, he said, Miss Rose, I've told my mom to put her phone down and she just won't. And she was just heartbroken by this young boy who was competing for his mom's attention with her smartphone. I think we need to look in the mirror sometimes, okay? In 1 Corinthians, we want them to copy us, right? Follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. So again, in addition to the digital trust framework, that's that copy me part of it, some other screen time bonuses or extras that go along with that. Number one is the 7-day rule. When it comes to apps that kids want to use today, you as parents or grandparents need to use it for 7 straight days before they do. I'll use a perfect example of one that is really popular right now, okay? Any of you in the room played the game Among Us? Anybody? All right? Yeah, I've got it on my phone. My daughter and I played all the time. It's a total blast, except when she kills me. But other than that, it's a blast, okay? Now, this is a game that in the App Store, now for you guys, right, at ages 12 and 14, fine. You've got this stuff figured out. But it's in the App Store, it's rated 9+, okay? That's elementary school. So you think, oh, this is great, no problem. Well, unfortunately, Among Us now has millions and millions of people playing this game. It is so popular right now. And so, unfortunately, what has happened in Among Us is it's following the exact same path that all apps who experience explosive growth is experiencing. And that it is quickly becoming overrun with trolls. And number two, the ads that are being shown in this app are not 9+. At least that's been my experience. And the screenshots that I have are not 9+ of the ads that I have seen. The only way you would know that is if you were playing the game. Play it for 7 straight days before they do. I'm not saying go home and take it away. I think it's a fun game. There's a lot worse games that kids could be playing right now, okay? But I'm just saying, make sure you understand all that goes on inside of it before you just say, yeah, that looks fine, be whatever, 7 straight days, okay? That's what we mean by that. Number two, when it comes to screen time, is we have to be consistent. I know it's difficult, but we have to be consistent. Okay, you can see that one up there. And in addition to that, in addition to what the boundaries are for screen time, every once in a while, just have a yes day. Balance it out sometimes. There are a few Saturdays here and there where it's just a yes day. Do you want to have Superman ice cream for breakfast? The answer is yes. Do you want to have whipped cream on your Cinnamon Toast Crunch? The answer is yes. Do you want to play the Switch for 6 hours today while mom and dad get a few things done? Yeah, go ahead. Every once in a while, they just need to know that the answer isn't always no. And then they'll accept the no's a lot better. 1 or 2 days here and there of a yes day is not going to totally turn their brain into mush, okay? I want there to be a little bit of balance in that sometimes. That's what I mean by a yes day. And sometimes what happens is after about 3 or 4 hours, they're like, oh, I'm done, I'm bored. And they go do something else. And they're like, that was awesome. I didn't have to say anything, right? It's all right. The next one up there, right? For kids who are, and this is especially great coming up on Christmas time here, for elementary, maybe early middle school, if you're not ready to put a supercomputer, AKA the iPhone, which could land the Apollo spacecraft on the moon right now over 1 million times simultaneously. It is a supercomputer. If you're not ready to put that into the pocket of your precious son or daughter quite yet, then get them a Gab. Gab is a non-internet connected, smart-like looking phone. You can talk, you can text, it has a radio, it has a camera on it, it has text messaging, I said that right? But it's not connected to the internet. I know that this is not a popular stance, and I'm sorry, young people in the room, you may disagree with me on this, but I just don't think that anybody who isn't in high school needs portable internet. It's just unnecessary. You talk about temptation, it's just unnecessary. Can I get a hold of you? Can I call you? Can I text you? Can I kind of see where you're at with GPS? I'm good. That's probably good enough. Gab doesn't have social media. That's another unpopular stance. I don't think There are many middle schoolers, and I was a full-time middle school pastor for 6 years, so I love junior high. It is just the most awesome age group. Some of you are like, are you kidding? Yeah, no, I love that age group. I just don't think that there are many middle schoolers whose lives are made better with social media. I just don't think so. Now, you may disagree, and I know the pandemic has caused us to flex on some of those things so that they can stay in touch with their friends. I get some of that, and I'm willing to extend a ton of grace in those situations that maybe through your phone they use social media, or maybe with certain guidelines or whatever. I'm not trying to turn this into a guilt trip. I just think that as long as you can put it off, the better. But you have to apply it to your own family situation and what's best. But that's what Gab is. It's a great device. We've been partners with them for a long time. We love them. And again, back to Bark, maybe for some older kids, and love your router. That is secondhand smoke and screens. Any questions about what I just talked about, friends who are here live? And I'll ask Josh the same question here for anything online. But any questions so far? Yes, in the back. Hi. So the question is, would I consider Messenger Kids social media? How many of you have heard of Messenger Kids? Raise your hand. Okay. Not really. It's actually pretty good. Now, it's still Facebook, and I do not trust the Zuck, okay? I do not trust the guy at all. I don't think he cares about any of us. But other than that, and their privacy is okay, I still think that even though it's Facebook Messenger Kids, they're selling the data a million times. I know this is being recorded, and he's probably going to sue me or whatever, but that's the only part of it I don't like. The other parts of it, in terms of its control around who you can talk to and who your kids can interact with, it's really good. And the reason I trust that part of it is because it has the best liability protection around. It's called Messenger Kids. Imagine the mommy bloggers who would just blow that thing up if it allowed any kind of inappropriate interaction with kids, right? So they know by branding it what they have that they are setting themselves up to create a product that actually is good for kids. So in that way, and we've tested, I've used it many, many, many times. If you've got a 9, 10, 11, whatever year old or 8-year-old, whatever, and that's a way for them to stay in touch with their friends, especially right now as we kind of ebb and flow out of different sort of lockdown phases, it's totally cool. Now, there are alternatives out there. There's another application called Village Social, which is a non-ad, non-algorithm, totally just wants you to interact with people you love app that I also recommend. Another one is called Kinzoo, Kinzoo. We've tested all those sort of social media apps for kids, and those are the 3 that we stack up against each other. You can find that right in our blog. Great question. I get that one a lot right now because of the pandemic. Anything online that I can answer, friends in the back? Nada. All right, cool. All right, I should ask real quick, Pastor, I don't know, do we have Matt, yeah, okay, I do want to ask, do we have like a built-in break that I could use here in just a minute to give everyone a chance to stand up, or would you like me just to keep on going? Who need breaks? All right, well, yeah, okay, good. But go ahead, you had a question, and we'll do that here in just a minute, okay? Good. Yeah. So the question is, age 2 and above, what is an appropriate amount of screen time? That is like the $1 million question, right? So I would say that there is no right amount of screen time, but there is probably a wrong amount of screen time. And let me give you some guidance that you can use to maybe figure out where that is. If every single time you tell your son or daughter to put the device down, he or she turns into an alter rage-filled version of him or herself, then they're probably getting too much screen time. In other words, if every single time you get mad when I take it away, then whatever you're playing is gone for at least a day. Because neurologically, dude, you need a reset. And I had to work through that with my son Blake, who can flip that switch pretty fast. And so it gave him an opportunity when he started to feel that anger boil up to figure out how to handle that, right? How to deal with that in a different, more productive way, like maybe walking away or maybe going outside or something. Dude, deal with it. You got to let it out. I don't want you to bottle it. Anger's going to find a way out, whether we channel that through a productive or a not productive way. Get it out, but don't throw the controller. That's not the right way. Okay? So I sometimes approach that question in that way. Another way that I approach that question, especially when it comes to older kids, is in our house, and you're going to think, wow, how is that possible? In our house, we do not have a screen time hour limit. In other words, what we do in our house with my 15-year-old daughter and with her 10-year-old brother, Cole, who we manage, them, is I look at all the other things in their life. Is their room clean? Is their homework done? Do they interact with us at the dinner table? Are they fairly pleasant human beings to be around? Are they taking regular showers? Right? I'm looking at all of these other things in their lives, and if all of these other like holistic whole child things are in place, then another hour on the switch is probably not that bad of a thing. Right? And so in some families, that's way too much variation to try to control. I totally get that. So the easier route, and I'm in support of that too, is to say on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it's 1 hour. On Saturday and Sunday, it's 2 hours. If that works for you, that's great. I'm just saying that in our family, I've chosen a different path. And that is to look at all of these other attributes of my kids. And if all of these other things are in place, and the minute that I say to Blake, even in the middle of a 3-minute Super Smash Brothers match, dude, I need you to help me with the dishwasher right now. And if he puts it down right away, then that earns him way more time. So I'm looking at all these other things to sort of constantly be going, hey, you're okay. Keep playing. You're good, man. That works for us. It doesn't work for everybody. So those are just some more, I would call them subjective ways to maybe look at screen time. There are pediatric associations. There's a couple of the big ones out there that do have, okay, for ages 3 to 5, it shouldn't be any more than X amount of time, and those are okay too. And maybe a combination of both of those are what's best for your family. Is that helpful? Good. All right, I'm going to jump into then the third one here, and then we're going to take a little bit of a stand up, maybe get a drink kind of break, and then we'll come back in and finish just with pornography and predators. No big deal. We'll finish with those two topics, all right? But first, let's get into mental health. And I want to just kind of jump to this slide here. There's a lot of text up there, and that can get kind of overwhelming. But I want you to look at the lines, right? These XY axis that we have here, and just notice the upward slope. That upward slope represents for different age groups the increasing trend of suicide completions by age from the year 2009 up through 2019, which should cause us to ask some pretty big questions. Why is that? What is it that has happened in American culture that has caused the rate of suicide across all age groups to increase at this kind of rate? It's worth looking at, right? Is social media a cause of this? This is the really popular question right now. Parents, a lot of people are asking this question, is social media a cause of what we're seeing in terms of anxiety, right? Massive cases of depression and suicide. I want to talk about that just a little bit because it's not a very easy answer, but it does come back to something I referenced before, and that is this idea of God-like technology knows our kids. So please do watch The Social Dilemma to get an idea of what I mean by that. I'm not trying to say in place of our Lord, but I'm saying that we have brains that are coming up against technologies that based on the things that we've already clicked on, the videos that we've watched, the things that we buy, that it can predict with scary precision the things that we want to tap or click on next. And I'm sure some of you in the room here have experienced this, haven't you? You've seen the ads that start to pop up in the places where you're spending time, and you're like, holy cow, how did they know? Or you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, is Alexa listening to me? And it showed me an ad, and I didn't even say it, but the friend next to me was like thinking it, and it still showed up? What the heck is going on? Anybody had some of those really weird, creepy experiences? Right? I don't know everything that's going on, and they keep telling us they're not listening, but I'm just telling you, friends, that there is an intelligence that is built into this technology now that is far beyond anything that many of us in the room can comprehend, far beyond what I can comprehend. And in the different applications where young people are spending a lot of time, these are extremely smart, exquisitely built applications. Snapchat did not create the snap streak in order to improve teenage relationships. Snapchat created a snap streak so that it would increase engagement inside of its app. Because if it could convince teenagers that there was significance to sending and receiving a snap every single day, and therefore I got a bigger number and a different emoji, when a child starts to worry about breaking the snap streak, their brain releases a neural hormone called cortisol, that fight or flight, what do I do, causing the brain to go to the safest place that it can get to, which in this case is back into Snapchat, sending the next snap. I interviewed a young man that I met down in Kalamazoo. He was a 10th grader, and he raised his hand during one of my talks. He's like, Chris, I'll share this. He said, I currently have a streak of just over 1,300 days. His name was Jaden. He's a wonderful young man, but he was totally addicted to Snapchat. And so I ended up talking to him after my talk, and I said, dude, can I come back and can we do an interview? I'd love to learn a little bit more about this. And we sat down, we did kind of a video interview, and this started back in 7th grade. And we estimated the amount of time that he spends on Snapchat every single day, and he estimated that between 7th and 10th grade, that he has spent somewhere between 125 and 150 days of his life using that application. And now the streak has been broken because he got his phone taken away. And yes, I've run into kids who, when they go on mission trips and they're not allowed to take their phone with them, they pay their friend to log into their Snapchat account and to keep the streak going. Yes, I've talked to all of those kids too. Do you think Snapchat knows these things, friends? Absolutely. They are brilliant when it comes to teenage neurology. These are apps made by adults for adults. Now, ironically, TikTok, which is wildly popular, right, has some of the best parental controls of any of the social media platforms that are out there. They're actually pretty good parental controls, but there is just something so toxically addictive about becoming TikTok famous that there are some kids who just can't handle it. It preys on that sort of anticipatory dopamine cycle of, is my video going to be the next one? Am I going to get a certain number of views? Am I going to get a certain number of followers? And I just don't know a ton of kids whose lives have been made radically better by the existence of this app. I did a talk down at a youth conference down in Texas back in June. There were about 600 middle and high schoolers that I got to speak to. It was just this fabulous opportunity. And I had this young girl, an 11th grader named Hannah, come up to me afterwards. And she said, Chris, I have a different talk I give to them, obviously, and I base it on Psalm 139, which talks about them beautifully, wonderfully made and how, intentional God is in their creation. And right. And she came up afterwards and she was like, you know what, Chris, I'm TikTok famous and I can't stand it. Like, she can't stop herself, and she can't stand what it's doing to her attention, and she just wants to make the next video, but she can't stand how much it consumes her. Even though she's popular, even though she makes money off of it, her life isn't better. And friends, I love Instagram. My platform uses Instagram as a way to reach tens of thousands of people all the time with our stuff, but I just don't know a lot of middle schoolers and a ton of high schoolers and a ton of adults who are immune from what I call the whispers of Instagram, this constant comparison. See, what I didn't tell you on that suicide graph earlier is that top graph, in terms of number of suicide completions, was actually for adult women. That they are also seeing this drastic increase. Now, friends, let me go back to the original question. Is social media a cause for this? It's complicated. Our parenting has a lot to do with this, and this is where it's hard to divide the variables, to know what of it is correlation versus what of it is causation. This was a study that was done by MIT where they looked at teenagers who, when they bring certain baggage into social media, be it certain trauma, be it certain protective parenting, that when they spend 3 hours or more in social media, they tend to be the teens who become more anxious. They tend to be the teens who become more depressed. They tend to be the teens who end up killing themselves. It's a complicated combination of an application that magnifies some of the worst parts of us, but when we bring our baggage to it, it magnifies all of those things too. And so an article that I really want you to read, I'm going to go past and I'm going to come back to it, is this one here. I want you to, I can't remember if this is in the note-taking guide or not, but this is from Kate Julian from The Atlantic. It is a 9,000-word dissection of American parenting that I really, really, really want you to find 30 minutes to read sometime. Because friends, what it does is it puts a mirror up in front of each and every one of us. And it shows us how our over-anxious, over-protective, fear-based parenting is creating a whole generation of young people who do not know how to deal with adversity. And therefore, when we put them in social media platforms who confront, like put adversity right in front of them, whether it's in the form of bullying, whether it's in the form of comparison, whether it's in the form of comments or things they don't know how to deal with, they don't know how to deal with those things, so they end up feeling more depressed. But why? Because our parenting has never allowed them to figure out how to deal with their own emotions. This article is fabulous, and it's also really, really hard to read. But in the 10 years that I've been in youth ministry, I've never read anything that has been more impactful. So I really invite you to watch that. All right, I'm going to go back just a minute to something I skipped over, and it's this video right here from Sean Parker. Sean Parker is one of the original founders of Facebook, back with Mark Zuckerberg, and he shared a few years ago some of the rationale they put in to some of the applications that they built, namely Facebook. I want you to listen to what he said.
Entrepreneur Sean Parker says he's not sure how much Facebook is benefiting
Can you guys hear that okay?
Parker was the founding president of Facebook when the company started over a decade ago. He recently made some very jarring comments about social media exploiting the vulnerabilities in human psychology during a conversation with Axios. Here's what he had to say.
You know, if the thought process that went into building these applications, Facebook being the first of them to really understand it, that thought process was all about how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. And that means that we need to sort of give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while because someone liked or commented on a photo or a post or whatever. And that's going to get you to contribute more content, and that's going to get you, you know, more likes and comments. I mean, it's a social validation feedback loop that it's like it's exactly the kind of thing that a hacker like myself would come up with, because you're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology. And I think that the inventors, creators, you know, and it's me, it's Mark, it's Kevin Systerman, Instagram, it's all of these people, understood this consciously, and we did it anyway.
So back to the question, friends, it's complicated. It's a combination of that. It's a combination of how we parent today. It's a combination of all of these things that has come together in these platforms to put our kids in a spot where I think it's easier to become a child who feels depression. It's easier to be a child who feels anxious. It's easier to be confronted with all kinds of voices who sometimes cause us to make life-ending choices. Is it causing it? No. I just think it creates a more fertile opportunity for those things to happen, okay? So if those are the realities, then what are some of the things that we can do in addition to just the awareness here? Number one is get really specific with good, curious questions. Just asking your sons and daughters sometimes how they feel when they're in social media. Not because their answers are going to cause you to take it away, but just because you're curious. Hey, hon, have you ever seen anybody make a really bad choice online? Have you ever seen anybody share something or say something? How did that make you feel? I'm not going to take it away. In fact, I am going to be really just listening and curious. I just would love to understand a little bit better how you feel in social media. Sometimes they just need permission to talk openly about how they feel about it. Again, not because you're going to take it away, Not because you're going to smash their iPhone, but because there is no better way to understand what is going on in the hearts and in the minds of young people today than understanding the answers to some of these questions. And sometimes they just need a safe place in order to ask them, okay? Questions that you see up on the screen here, right? Just really important, curious questions. Do you worry about missing notifications? Do you ever feel anxious after using social media? And friends, I would ask you as adults, ask yourself some of these same questions. Have you ever felt worse after thumbing through your social media feed? As a parent, yes or no? Remember, going back to what we understand about their neurology, how difficult is it for you sometimes to process the way that you feel when going through social media with supposedly a fully formed brain compared to where their brain is at? Guys, it's tough. Give them safe, comfortable places to ask and answer questions like this. Remind them that they do have a choice. I think sometimes you just need to give them permission. Say, hey, what if we just took a social media break for a few days? Let's just try this together. Or maybe you both together go through an exercise, and as a parent, I would invite you to do this. It is so healthy to cleanse and purge your friend list every once in a while. Who are the people that you follow that honestly don't make you feel better about yourself? Are there people that you follow, both teens and adults, that are really toxic for you? I'm guessing the answer is yes. If you've been on Facebook for 10 years or more, like some of us have, when was the last time you looked at your friend list? Are they really friends? Do you really want to show every single one of your quote-unquote Facebook friends a photo of your child holding that really corny black board that has the white letters on it of their first name and their first day of school and the name of their school and the name of them, and you've just told 1,000 people that you've accepted as friends on Facebook over the past 10 years exactly the name of your son or daughter, exactly where they go to school, and exactly what grade they're in? Really? That'd be a really healthy exercise for you too to maybe go through those friends. I just think they need some permission sometimes to make some of those choices. Be observant about some of the changes. I know that as teens, sometimes life and emotions go up and down, but even for you, and if you're observant, engaged, and informed, you know what a range of reasonableness is when it comes to emotional variation. And if they're outside of that, just again, become a loving investigator. Don't become a hammer, right? Ask a lot of curious, good questions, all right? Again, don't forget about Bark as a way to have a tool on the device. You know, if you don't know what Bark is an algorithm that is smart enough that it looks for keyword phrases. So in other words, if you connect Bark to social media platforms, it looks for phrases like kill or I don't like myself or all of these different phrases that could lead towards suicide. They've actually prevented kids from taking their own lives because they've alerted parents to suicidal ideation. That's what Bark is. And for certain families, that can work well. So I just always want you to be aware of that. All right. Now is the time, because we've been at this for about 70 minutes, which is a lot to take in. First, let me ask if there are any questions about anything that we've talked about so far. We've talked about neurology, we've talked about screen time, and now we've talked about mental health. We need to take a bit of a breather, maybe just to get up and walk around before we come back in and get into some of the heavy stuff. So any questions from anybody here in the room? What about online? Nada. All right, teens in the room. There's a few of you in here. Any questions about anything? Have I said anything horribly wrong yet? No? I'm doing all right? Okay, thank you. You tell me the truth? Okay, thank you. All right. All right, friends, with that, I would invite you to stand up. You know, we'll be back in here. I'm going to start a video and online friends, you'll see this too. I'm going to start another video to bring us back in exactly 5 minutes. Okay? Take a quick breather. We'll see you right back in here.
A long time ago, families were in communities. They were local, they were small.
I was born in the very depths of the Great Depression. I was put to work carrying wood, carrying water. I knew how to shell peas. I knew how to break beans. We still didn't have electricity.
I have 2 Instagram accounts.
I use Instagram, Snapchat,
and TikTok.
TikTok and Fortnite.
I can just scroll for hours on end.
11 hours a day.
It's been 8, 9.
Maybe like 12.
It's actually been a way that we can keep track of them out there in the real world where things really are scary.
The lives of kids were sort of changing slowly for a while, and then all of a sudden, most kids were able to get on social media, and that's when everything skyrocketed.
The rates at which they're experiencing problems continues to increase.
We also know that the teen suicide rate increased 56%.
Last year alone, we received over 18 million reports of international and domestic online child sexual abuse.
We have traded a false sense of safety and security for actually putting our kids in riskier situations.
I call it the race to the bottom of the brainstem. So it starts with techniques like pull to refresh.
Pretty much every guy has like an addiction to it, but no one talks about it.
But it's just faster now, and it's younger.
Well, yeah, like nudes of girls go around to school all the time.
At the beginning of the year, there were multiple suicides before school even started.
There were men that wanted to talk to children at all hours of the day and night.
On Snapchat, one thought it'd be a funny idea to talk the other one into committing suicide, and she did it. She's dead.
After about 6 weeks, we were able to crack his phone.
Kids right now are going to experience the worst of what we're going through.
I'm a little nervous.
The first time.
Do you think your parents know that this happens?
No. My kid won't do that. My kid would never. My kid's school isn't like that. You're wrong.
Because what they see, they feel neurologically compelled to do.
Right now, we're effectively living in an experiment. How is this going to affect us? We'll find out.
I had the chance to participate. Bark, who I've referred to already, they put together this movie, Childhood 2.0, that is free to watch on YouTube. It's also now available on Amazon Prime if you're a Prime member, and Protect Young Eyes had the opportunity to participate in that with them. Again, it's another opportunity. It's something that you may want to watch as parents, and then maybe watch it with your sons and daughters as a way just to spur a conversation, good, curious conversation. So let's jump into the 4th section of your notes there, which is about pornography, just a tap away. Pornography mimics all of the other neurochemicals that the good Lord has given us to experience intimacy, right, with each other. Right? Sex was God's idea, and it's a good and it's an amazing thing between husband and wife, but yet pornography hijacks this very same neural pathway so that over time, the brain starts to believe that the best path to my outcome, because remember, the brain, for all of its complexity, is a very simple organ. What I feed my precious brain is what it learns to love, and it craves efficiency more than anything to get to an outcome as efficiently as possible. And I can tell you that pornography is a much easier way to get to the thing that I want, and that is that neurological and physical high that comes from sex than actual intimacy with my wife or with my husband, right? So over time, what the brain starts to believe is that pixels are better and faster than people. It hijacks the very great thing that God has given us. And it turns what is supposed to be an us experience into a very selfish me experience. And it teaches me to look at the opposite sex as something that's an object instead of a human soul, instead of a person. Because I want to use that thing for my gratification. This is the lie and the toxicity and the deception of pornography. 27% of the unfiltered internet when it comes to video content is pornographic. 27% in a lot of things isn't a great idea, right? If my grades are 27%, that's not very good. If I'm a 27% free throw shooter, that's not very good. But when it comes to the internet, 27% is a massive number. Imagine for just a minute growing up back in the 80s or late 70s when I was a young boy, and every morning On the coffee table where I grew up, my parents put 4 magazines on this coffee table, and one of them was pornographic and 3 of them weren't, and they just hoped that I didn't look at the wrong one. That's what 27% of the unfiltered internet looks like. I would argue that whether you are 4, 14, or 40, none of us need to be spending time in the unfiltered internet. It's just not good for any of us, friends. And this is not the porn that you grew up with. It's not the porn that was down the road. I can tell you the story, and Mark, you're going to... Yes, Lord, we're talking about porn. I can tell you the story about the guy down the street who had the VHS tape, which had something that had been filmed from Cinemax, that we had to put this strategic, elaborate plan together to sneak down to his house while mom and dad weren't home because we didn't have a VHS tape. He did, and we had to watch it for this little bitty snippet that was probably all blurred anyway. Like, that's what it took just to see something back then. Again, none of those barriers exist anymore. And it's not that thing that's at somebody else's house, some magazine that you've hidden somewhere. It's in the places where they're also spending time. It's in the social media platforms where they're also spending time. It's in the Instagram feed all of the time. It's kids who tell us constantly that even while doing homework and research, it's just in front of them sporadically all the time, right? So when we say, porn just a tap away, you've, as adults, have experienced this, right? You've run into things that you really wish you hadn't seen, and they are too. And friends, I need us to leave the ignorance of the land of if, that your kid will see pornography while they live with you. And in fact, statistically, taking a look at all the young people that are represented in this room here, along with those that are represented by the adults that are watching online, statistically, there are children in this school who are actively and consistently watching pornography. Are you involved enough to know? Or are you so afraid of the topic that you've just never gone there? Everyone in the room, repeat after me: pornography. Oh, that was way too timid. Everyone in the room, repeat after me: pornography. It's just a word. You don't need to keep repeating that part. That's okay. But good listening. I want us to be comfortable. People ask me all the time, Chris, what's the right age to talk to my kids about pornography? And I look at them and I say, I don't know you and I don't know your kid, but if you wait until you're ready, it's too late. I don't know you and I don't know your kid, but they're ready before you are, so get it done. This may not apply here at OSL, but I don't know you and I don't know your kid, but if they're 6 and they ride the school bus because they're in kindergarten, then they need to know the word. Because I want them to know it from you long before they hear it from the kid in 8th grade in the front seat with the unfiltered iPhone. So I want you to ask yourself, what's the right age to talk to my kid about pornography? Whatever age pops into your head, I want you to subtract 2, and that's probably the right age. Because for 2 years, what I want is your definition, your ideas, your thoughts around what to do when that word pops up flowing through their brain. And you've said it so frequently, you've talked about it so often, that when they hear it somewhere else, they're like, the surprise factor is 0. The curiosity factor is nothing. Why? Because for 2 years you've talked about this word, and it's no big deal. And I'm guessing for a lot of you as parents that was not what was modeled to you by boomer parents who are afraid to talk about that word. And that's the problem sometimes, is we as Gen X parents are the first ones dealing with this in our parenting. I'm sorry, I know it's tough being a parent, but it's even harder being them. Why? Because it's around every corner. We have to say it more frequently than the internet is. So a few things here. Number 1, let's make porn the norm. And you're like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? How do we make porn the norm? We need to talk about it openly and honestly. Let me give you an example. So as I said, my youngest son, This was earlier this year, okay? And we went to, before everything shut down, we were up at Great Wolf Lodge, right? This was back in late February, early March. I can't remember when it was. Things were still opened up. And we were at Great Wolf Lodge, and so I was in the changing room. We were getting ready to go home. If you know where this place is, up in Traverse City, great indoor water park. We were on the second day. We were getting ready to go home. And so me, Blake, Cole, and Grant were in the changing room, and Andrea and Lauren were in theirs over there. And this is how I know that we've done our job to normalize the topic of pornography, because here is Blake standing in front of a mirror, naked as a jaybird, going, porn, not porn, porn, not porn, porn, not porn. Like, dude, that's funny. Like, high five. Like, right? He was 8. And he knows the word. We've talked about it so openly and honestly that to him, he kind of knows, right, that people without their clothes on, private parts, right, if any of that's going on, he knows exactly what to do, and he knows the word. I want it to get to the point where it's something that you can kind of say openly among all 6 of us. Now, Grant doesn't really understand, just given cognitively where he's at, but for all of us, we can just say the word pornography, and it's really not that big of a deal in our house. I'll never forget when my daughter came home so excited when she was in 7th grade. There was somebody that was in the school that was talking about, abstinence or whatever the topic was, and they were talking about, some of the causes of why kids choose to have sex outside of marriage. And here's my daughter in the back. She raised her hand, so proud. And she came home to tell me this. She was so proud of this story. She's like, I know one. 7th grade. You don't raise your hand in 7th grade. I know one. Yes. What's your name? Lauren. What's one? Pornography. Well, you're right. But what 7th grader actually offers that as an answer in class in front of your classmates and then goes home excited to tell your dad so he would be proud about the fact that you raised your hand and said porn in your class, okay? I want it to become that kind of conversation. You have to be more persistent and consistent than YouTube, than Google, than Snapchat, than all of the other voices out there that are vying for their attention, okay? This is a blog post. Again, if you're online, you can scan that QR code and go right there, how to talk to a 5-year-old about porn. Here I talk about some of the examples. I remember when Blake was 5 years old and he was at the kitchen counter and he had a computer up in front of him, and I said, hey, Blake, you love using the computer. He's like, yeah, Dad. He's always been a gamer. The kid just loves screens, even to this day. Remember, he's the one I can't beat on the Switch anymore, and he was in front of this computer, and I was like, hey, Blake, you love computers? Yes. I said, Blake, listen, you know what your private parts are, don't you? He's like, well, yeah. I mean, every 5-year-old boy knows what his private parts are, okay? You know what I'm talking about. Yes, Dad, I know what my private parts are. I'm like, great. Blake, if you are ever on the computer and you ever see someone else's private parts, boy or girl, anything under the bathing suit area, I want you to do something. Do you know what I want you to do? Now he's listening. He's like, what? 2 things, dude. Put it down and tell someone. Repeat after me. Put it down, tell someone, tell someone. Awesome, high five. And as often as I remembered, I would ask him, Blake, hey man, if you ever see anything weird, unusual, private parts, uncomfortable on the computer, what do? I put it down and tell someone. Like that's a phrase that to this day, like we say that all the time. And then I gave him a list. I was like, okay, Blake, someone, who could you tell? If mom or dad aren't around, who are the someones that you could tell? If you ever saw something on a computer that made you feel uncomfortable, kind of gave you that little feeling in the stomach, like, something's just not right, who could you tell? He's like, okay, Grandma McKenna, I could tell Aunt Susie, I could tell Lauren. I'm like, yes, awesome. And he had his list of someones. Now, word of caution. If you decide to have your son or daughter make the someone list, please promise that you will make sure that everybody who is on the someone list knows that they're on the someone list. This is a very important step. Because the last thing that I want to have happen is when Blake is at Grandma's house and he's watching the iPad, he's like, Grandma, private parts on the iPad. I don't need Grandma freaking out. Okay? I need Grandma to know the drill. And it's kind of funny to laugh about it, but listen, that's actually a super critical step. Because if in that moment, see, remember, Blake loves his Grandma McKenna. He would never want to do anything to make Grandma upset. And if Blake does the exact thing that dad told him to do, and by doing that, it actually makes grandma freak out, that creates a very confusing dialogue in the mind of a young boy. And it starts to tell him the lie that he did something wrong. It's so critical that for the people that spend the most time with your kids, that they know exactly how to respond. That in that moment, grandma tells him how proud she is, gives him a high five, and says, dude, you did exactly the right thing. In fact, we're gonna celebrate this, and you can have all the ice cream you want. Good job. That's what I mean by someone. Friends, in that entire conversation, that entire example that I just gave you, I taught my 5-year-old son what to do when he sees pornography, and I never said the word. Now, when Blake turned 6, and from time to time, he rode the school bus, he was in the back of the car, I was driving, which is a great time, right? Face to face, it can be a little freaky having a hard conversation with dad, but shoulder to shoulder or back seat, front seat, that's a really less intimidating opportunity, so I took advantage of it. And I was like, hey, Blake, you ride the bus sometimes now? You know, I've talked to you about private parts on the computer. There's a word for that, and they call that pornography. If you ever hear that on the bus, do you know what I want you to do? He's like, what? I want you to tell someone. And he's like, I already know that. I'm like, yes, you do. It was already a framework that he knew, and now he just had a word to go along with it. It was no big deal. I want us to have those conversations super early, super often, and that blog post can help. These are some books that we also highly recommend. That QR code will take you right to them. Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, authored by a good friend of ours, Kristen Jensen, and her organization. They just do a fabulous job. Again, that put it down and tell someone, this is giving them the tools to know what to do when they see something online that they shouldn't see, giving them that permission. In addition to that, right, in addition to this, put it down and tell someone, we want them to be in digital situations where we have blocked as much of the porn as possible. That goes back to the router. This is a blog post up here on the screen, how to block porn on any digital device for free, which has been viewed by tens of thousands of parents and been shared over and over again. Block as much porn on as many devices as you can, getting back to that 27% of the unfiltered internet is pornographic in some way. Okay, friends, we need to be blocking as much as we can, all right? Some additional extras when it comes to pornography is don't freak out, don't freak out, don't freak out. Promise me right now that if your son or daughter takes the courageous step of saying, you know what, Dad, I need to tell you something, but I have been watching this, or whatever it is, promise me right now that your very first response will be love. In John chapter 1, we're invited to emulate Jesus in this perfect balance of grace and truth. My experience would tell me that when it comes to issues of the heart, like addictions or like things that they might do online, that it's almost always better to lead with grace. They first need to know that everything is going to be okay. Man, I am so sorry that happened to you. In fact, I'm going to apologize to you as your dad in this moment that I didn't do more to protect you from that. I am so sorry that that happened, but I am so proud that you told me, because as a dad who also used to struggle with that issue, who hid it from your mom for a lot of years, I can tell you how hard it is to admit that that's your problem. So buddy, good job. And to protect you from that for a little while, do you think we can maybe put the phone away for a week or just anything to have a little bit of a reset here? In other words, I'm not saying no consequences. I'm just saying that the love needs to come before the consequence. The grace needs to come before the truth. And in my experience, they're often willing to accept it because they already know that everything is going to be okay. Especially with this issue, okay, friends? Don't freak out. I use a service called Covenant Eyes. I have 2 pastors at my church who receive an internet report of my iPhone and the devices that I use so they know how I'm using technology. My kids know that I have Covenant Eyes. Why? Because it's important for them to know that even dad needs help using the internet well. It's not just a them issue. If this is a service that could be helpful for you or teenagers, I would invite even, older middle school, even teenagers to use this service. Why? Not because you have a problem, but so that you don't have a problem. It's services like this that can help us stay out of tempting places that I'm just so happy to be able to recommend. Now, in full disclosure, I make no money if you decide to use Covenant Eyes. In fact, I work for Covenant Eyes when I'm not working for Protect Young Eyes. I'm in their marketing department. That service has been a part of my life for the past 10 years. I love what they stand for. And so I recommend them to you out of a spirit of, wow, they literally saved my life, okay? In a lot of different ways. And if that's a help to you, I just invite you to check them out, okay? Additional things is to notice the signs. These may be in your note-taking guide, I can't remember, but these are 4 different things that we have done some research on to understand when getting help is necessary beyond what you can offer as a parent. A lot of times you can just solve a lot of things right there in that moment, but it could be that you're confronted with a situation that's a little too serious for what you can handle. And so know the signs, know your limits, reach out to the local church in other ways that can maybe point towards good therapy, good counselors, whatever that might look at. Don't be afraid of those things. That can sometimes be necessary. I'm here to tell you, friends, that many times when it comes to this issue, you cannot pray it away. God made us as carnal, physical beings. Now, I believe that with a touch of the Lord that our neural pathways can be fixed. I just haven't seen it happen very often. A combination of the Holy Spirit and good old-fashioned therapy is often what is needed, and there's no shame in that. We need to be okay with that. And the church is horrible at just saying, memorize more scripture, pray a little bit harder, and you'll be okay. When it comes to this issue, that is not true. So, I could talk a long time about this issue just because not only have I lived it, but now I live alongside it with a lot of men and women who struggle with this issue. I've seen it from all kinds of angles. I've talked to countless teens about it. In fact, the last 2 teenagers who have reached out to me on my website to talk about this issue are teen girls. This is not just a guy problem. It is a human problem that affects all of us. And it's not often that you want to raise your hand and ask a lot of questions about this issue in a public setting like this, but if it's something that you need more information about, please do not wait another day and send me a message, and I'll do my best to help. I'll do my best. And again, Bark and blocking the porn at that router can be a really important step too. In Psalm 119:37, we're asked, right, to turn our eyes away from worthless things and to preserve my life according to your word. Parents, this is a wonderful piece of scripture to use as a prayer over our children, to insert a personalization to it, right? Turn Lauren's eyes away from worthless things. Preserve Lauren's life according to your word. Turn Cole's eyes away from worthless things. Preserve Cole's life according to your word. When it comes to how they use technology, it's, for me, been a really beautiful section of scripture to pray over my children when I didn't know what to say. And friends, I just want you to know when it comes to this issue of pornography and also with predators, does your child know beyond any doubt that he or she can always land softly with you? It's really, really important that there's no shame, that there's no condemnation, that they can always land softly and talk to you openly about this issue, okay? I'm going to jump right into the last one, and then we're going to do questions at the very, very end before we're dismissed. We're doing fine on time. It's 7:50 right now, but let's end then with predators 25% of the time. What in the world could that mean? We asked a public middle school and elementary school, grades 3 through 8, of just over 700 kids where we did a presentation to answer this question. A creeper has tried to talk to me. Someone that I don't know has tried to talk to me online. Yes or no? And you can see for grades 3 through 8 what the percentage is there. And when you kind of average these all out, it's somewhere between 25 and 30%. That's what we mean by predators 25% of the time. Another question that we asked them was, of you, right, high schoolers, grades 9 through 12, answer this question, yes or no. I sometimes use my smartphone all night long, and 36% of them said yes. And they were quite proud of this. They're like, yeah, sometimes all night. Like, wow, 36%, okay? We asked those same 3rd through 8th graders this question. How many of you keep your phone next to you all night long? You sleep, right? Not that you're up all night, but you sleep with your phone right next to me. And for those that had a phone in grades 3 through 8, 45% of them said yes. They sleep with their phone right next to them. And when you talk to those who prosecute these predators, it's always as a part of that toxic trio: bedrooms, boredom, and darkness. I'm not saying that we shouldn't ever, especially during the pandemic, have devices in the bedroom. I'm just saying that, in my experience, internet-ready devices in the bedroom automatically create greater digital risk. Because wherever the kids are, whatever apps the kids are using today, now even among us, is always where the predators are. It always has been this way, friends. And so when you see the apps up on the screen, right, I've talked about a few, and the 3 up on the screen there are Roblox, right, TikTok and Instagram. It's always been this way. If these are apps where kids are spending time, which is like Roblox, which is the most popular game, not Fortnite, right, or Minecraft, Roblox is the most popular game for elementary and early middle school kids. Of course, this is also where the predators are. Of course, this is where an unmoderated chat feature can create great problems for young people. Every single app that has chat in it always has human beings that are going to try to make contact with little people, with young people, with teenagers. The Fitbit app, I can tell you the story of the dad whose middle school daughter was a cross-country runner who connected in the community of runners with others who was pursued by a predator through the Fitbit app. I can tell you about the family who told me the story about how their teenage daughter started an online devotional through the Bible app, through teen, right? There's teen devotionals on there, was being pursued by a predator through the Bible app. Friends, wherever there is the ability to interact with other human beings, in every single app, there's always going to be predatory activity. Now again, this isn't me trying to make you in just fear and go grab a hammer and smash the iPhone, but every single child who uses these applications needs to know what to do and need to give them permission. Instagram has been deemed the platform worst when it comes to child grooming. This process of people, adult men most often, who are looking for young people who are in some sort of distress, some sort of emotional, problem, especially now during the pandemic. They're lonely, whatever they are, and they groom them towards a certain outcome, send a certain type of photo. And then you do that, I'm going to extort you in order to get credit card information, all this other information, right? Again, we just need to prepare our kids for these places because in my experience, friends, I have seen more horrific content and language and have experienced more predatory activity in my test accounts on Instagram than I have with any other platform, and it's not even close. If you want to read about what we experienced with our 12-year-old test account, you can read about it in this blog post, but please keep the lights on and make sure you have people around you because it's horrible, okay? Do not read it alone in the dark. I did not blur out anything. And Bark has done some similar testing through some videos that they have put together, all right? And so here are some quick extras about predators because this is such an important topic. Number one, assume that it will happen. And because of that, we need to give them tools. Earlier on, I told you about put it down and tell someone, which is something that I used with Blake when it came to pornography. The same exact phrase can be used when it comes to predators. If anybody ever tries to talk to you, and this QR code that's up there, and in your note-taking guide there, you have a blog post that talks about tricky people, right? We give them permission to put it down and tell someone whenever somebody who we don't know tries to talk to us on the internet. It's not strangers anymore. We used to identify strangers by what they looked like, right? Hey, Chris, if you're going to the park with your friend and you see a guy in front of a van with a hoodie and a puppy and a candy and no windows, don't talk to him. And so we used to know by vision, okay, I don't know this person, puppy candy thing, stay away. It doesn't work that way in the digital age. We have to give our kids permission to walk away from nice people who they don't know because sadly, unfortunately, some of the nicest people on the internet are also those who are horrible. They know how to talk to young people. Does your nice son or daughter know how to walk away from a nice predator? If the answer to that question is no, or I'm not sure, you have 24 hours to fix it. Give them permission. I don't care how nice they are. If you don't know them, you do two things. You put it down and you tell someone. Again, when it comes to predators, let's avoid the toxic trio. I think we've made that one pretty obvious. Being super observant. And again, we have our tools, Bark and the Griffin, if we need to be shutting off social media and screen time at certain times of night. That's so important. And back to that earlier question, does your son or daughter know beyond any doubt that he or she can land softly with you? And so we talk openly about these friends, whether it's pornography or predators or whatever it is. Why? Because we give our kids armor in a digital age that is coming at them, guns a-blazing, right? In Ephesians here, 6:13, it says, therefore, put on the full armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, and trust me, in their pockets, the day of evil is here, okay? You may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything, to stand. All right, I'm going to pause there, and then we are going to finish. Any questions about pornography or predators here in the sanctuary? Anybody? Just those two topics, no big deal. Online, anything?
Yes, a question came in. If you have a child that has problems with an addiction, especially pornography, how do you approach that addiction?
Well, you first identify the source of where they're getting it from, and you cut that off. And then you sit down and you have those loving, curious, just you're going to be okay conversations to let them know that everything's going to be fine, that we're going to get through this, that a lot of people struggle with this issue. Now, what can we do together? In my experience, when it comes to really any digital issue, whenever the young person involved is a part of creating the solution, they're almost always more bound to obey the solution. Don't make this a bunch of rules or things that you've said. Invite them into the solution. All right, I know you feel horrible. You wouldn't have come to me if you didn't feel horrible about this. What can we do together in order to make this right? Do you have any ideas? What are some things that you want to do? I have some ideas myself, but what is some stuff that we could work on here together? Invite them into that solution. And then I go back to those 4 things that I had up there to know whether or not that is enough based on the severity of the problem. And if it's outside of what you're capable of being the solution for, then reach outside to get help. Do not let parental pride get in the way of reaching out to a good counselor, reaching out to somebody that they can talk to. Maybe they're too embarrassed to talk to mom or dad about it. That's okay. It could be a youth director. It could be somebody they could talk to. Find someone. In my case, it wasn't until I invited the loving light of relational accountability into my life that I was able to overcome the issue of pornography. Speaking about it openly and honestly with a couple of other guys who understood what I was going through. That's what it took. None of us in the room, 14 or 40, one-on-one against pornography wins. Never. It's only by bringing it into the loving light where Jesus Christ can do something with it and it can finally be dealt with. In the secret, it always wins. And so whatever we can do to invite those kinds of just open and honest conversations with our young people that might be struggling, that's what I hope and that's what I want to have happen. Anything else?
Additionally, I know a lot of people might be feeling like I am on this. What if you've been lax, just in general, in being on top of these issues that you've been talking about tonight?
So the question is, what if up to this point, now that I am adequately freaked out, I've been too lax, and what do I do now? Anybody feeling that way maybe? Okay, first of all, you're not a horrible parent. You're not. What I would say is I would just go home and say, hey, I sat through a presentation. And in this presentation, I heard a lot of things Not all of it applies to every kid, but I learned a lot of things. I learned a lot about how social media can impact us, whether you're a teen or an adult. I heard about how there's a lot of things online that we should and shouldn't click on. I just learned a lot of things. At times, son or daughter of mine, it was hard for me to sort of stay focused and not freak out. I just want to be honest with you about that. So you talk to me about technology. What are some of the things that you love and don't love about technology? Let's compare some notes here. Let's see where we land on some things. I just want to share openly. My promise to you is that whatever you say to me, I'm not going to smash and take away the iPhone. I just want to talk openly right now. I'm not going to freak out. I'm not going to freak out. I'm not going to freak out. But I do want to apologize because I probably have not done a good enough job of protecting you from some of these things. And I'm sorry about that. Maybe you've experienced things online that I wish wouldn't have happened, and you know what, honey? That's probably mostly my fault, and I am so, so sorry. I know better now, and because of that, I am not just gonna take it all away. I just simply wanna talk openly with you about it and let you know that I've struggled with some things. I don't know what the conversation looks like, but I want it to be bathed in a few things, and that is authenticity, of openness, of just humility, right? Don't freak them out with a bunch of statistics and a bunch of information. Don't show them your 4 pages of full notes because they're going to go, oh my gosh. Don't waterfall all of it on top of them. Do not go home and duct tape your kid to a chair and between now and midnight just vomit it all over them. The waterfall approach does not work when it comes to these digital topics. I instead just want there to be a steady drip. A steady drip. Pray for a window. Pray for the Spirit's guidance. You know your kids better than I do. Look for opportunities during car time, meal time, bedtime. Whatever times your kid may be more open to those things. Don't sit them down and look face to face, especially if they're young men. Young boys clam up. Why? Because eye contact releases cortisol in their brains and they don't want to talk to you. That's why it becomes grunts and noises. Get them shoulder to shoulder. If I want the real story about what happened during the day with Cole and Blake, I get shoulder to shoulder on the couch and I play the Nintendo because when their thumbs start moving and they're sitting next to dad, their mouth starts moving. But if I sat down and I said, so Cole, tell me all about your day. How did it go? I get nothing. Right? So know your kids, know what's going on inside of them, be a student of your children, pray for a window, and then just keep dripping it out there. Does that help? Okay.
Chris, you mentioned earlier that a lot of the laws governing internet usage are about 24 years old. What types of federal regulations are currently in the works?
There are a couple of efforts. There is an effort right now actually to try to increase the digital age of adulthood, which is currently 13 up to age 15 or 16. The Children's Online Privacy and Protection Act, COPPA, was issued back in 1999/2000, and that stated that the digital age of adulthood is 13. That is on social media platforms when organizations can start collecting what they call PII, personally identifiable information for marketing purposes from young people. That's way too young for how smart this technology is today. That's one thing we're trying to get changed. Another thing that we're trying to get changed is you can look up the Telecommunications Decency Act of 1996, Section 230, prevents all of us from going after social media platforms for the content in these platforms. Even though they've built the digital boxes in which all of this content, including sometimes illegal content, has been placed, none of you can sue Snapchat. None of you can sue Instagram. None of you can sue YouTube. Why? Because of a law that was passed in 1996. Under the spirit of innovation, I get it. We've always done this as a nation. We want innovation. We want industry to flourish. And so we let them do whatever they want up until they start doing great harm to human beings, and then we decide to try to regulate them. Look at our history. It's always been that way. And we find ourselves in the same exact situation right now with technology, is we now have trillion-dollar market value organizations that have been allowed to flourish unabated with a golden ticket of immunity to put in front of our young people whatever they want. It has to stop. That's all I'll say about that. Any other questions?
One final question, Chris.
Yeah.
This comes in online. How can you explain the dangers of interacting with strangers online without building a sense of fear?
Without building a sense of fear, I would ask them, what would they do? If they pass somebody that they don't know while riding their bike, what would they do? If they are walking down, I don't know, some place, I don't know, walking down the street, like as tangible as we can make it, just give them scenarios and say, okay, if you're playing this game, whatever game they like to play, let's assume that they're playing Fortnite or whatever it might be, and somebody tries to talk to you. It's almost impossible to play a game these days that doesn't have some kind of chat. And just say, hey, if somebody tries to talk to you, what should the rules be around that? Just invite them into it. Again, I mean, I want them to be a little bit, not afraid out of a, fear, but I do want them to have this healthy appreciation for some of the dangers that can come along with those interactions. Every kid is going to respond to that a little bit differently, but I just want to give them as many tangible situations to practice the reaction as possible so that they know what to do. Just make it tangible. What else?
What if your kid has a YouTube channel of their own? How do you monitor that?
You watch their videos with them. You make sure that every time they're using YouTube, it's on restricted mode, and you do not let them have a YouTube channel until you're comfortable with the possibility of them seeing pornography. That's what I would say. I have a lot of strong feelings about YouTube. What else? Yes. So the question is, my spouse couldn't be here tonight, but I'd like for him to see this presentation. Yep, it's going to be available after tonight on the YouTube channel. On the Our Savior Lutheran YouTube channel. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, that is correct. So
just go to live streaming and it'll be on our collection of videos.
Yep, very good. Awesome. What else? Yes, Matt. Well, I think that, as often as we can invite other parents just into curious conversations, right? Whether it's on the sidelines or whether, whatever it is, just not out of a spirit of judgment, but just say, hey, I found this great website. They have a great free newsletter. I just wondered if you might want to get it too. I think that just sort of good, casual, friendly sharing is a good thing. Let me adjust the question just a little bit. I'm not sure if I'm understanding it, so I'll answer it a slightly different way. I had somebody recently ask me what I believe is one of the greatest technical challenges that stands in front of us as parents or as educators. I believe that we are on the beginning stages of a true mental health crisis with our young people. That coming out of the isolation, or maybe back into the isolation now with the second wave, who knows? But we are seeing the isolation impact and I would call it oversaturation of screens that have replaced relational interactions that I think is going to manifest itself in a sharp increase in massive depressive episodes and eventually an increase in suicide ideation. And I don't think we've seen even the beginnings of that yet. That over time, that's just going to be the wave that comes our way, is just an inordinate amount of young people who just don't know how to deal with their own emotions, who were stuck way too long away from each other and just are dealing with these issues. The mental health aspect of all of this just really, really, really concerns me. What other questions? These are good ones. You're ending strong. Yes, hi, in the back. Yeah, so what do we do given that our present reality is a lot of the things that you just described, Chris, right? That we are stuck away from each other. I wish I had a good answer. We just have to get ridiculously creative in how we allow our young people to interact at all costs, whether it's, driving your daughter to her friend's house with a care package that she made that she drops on the doorstep and then stands 6 feet away and they do kind of a little dance in front of each other and they just have this moment of relationship together that was highly inconvenient because I really didn't have time for it, but I took video of it because it was amazing. And so whatever that needs to look like for you in order to comply with good social responsibility, given the realities that we have, let's inconvenience ourselves to make it happen at all costs. And let's model some of that for them too. I was talking to Mark and others that, as a family, we have decided that for us, it's not good for us to go back to a physical church service yet for a lot of different reasons at the church that we go to. But we have, reached out to 2 or 3 other families who we know what their practices are, and we've kind of put them in our bubble of exposure, and we're now intentionally doing home church with them. It's a lot more work, right? You got to get the house all cleaned up on a Sunday morning, and you make a dish and all these things, but it's important for us to do this with our reality so that we have some semblance of a coming together to worship God. And so I think it just demands for us to get super, super creative. Now, I don't have a ton of answers on the school side, given that now I have the reality of, as I was explaining, this sort of hybrid model where my daughter is going to be online a ton doing school. I don't have a ton of answers there yet. Not until schools figure out a better way to implement ed tech as a part of the pandemic. And right now, a lot of schools are just making it up as they go. And I give them a lot of credit. It is not a fun time to be an educator or a principal or a superintendent in schools right now because every day is something different. So I have great empathy. And so if that means a little more screen time because they need to get their schoolwork done, and I'm trying to be understanding of that, but I'm hoping that this is not our future. There's got to be something else that the educational system can offer us, even in the midst of a pandemic, so that my kid is not staring at another Zoom call for hour after hour after hour. It's been 5 months now. 5 months is okay, but 10 and 15 months, or whatever it looks like, is not. I hope the news about the vaccine today is true. So I don't have a ton of answers just because it's so new, but those are just some swirling, unorganized ideas out of Chris's brain that maybe are helpful. I don't know. I would ask people here, what are some ideas that you would share to that question? Right? If these are some of our realities, what are some things that your families have chosen to do to try to overcome some of those obstacles or some of those situations? Anything? Yeah.
I was just going to say that it's interesting to know that we've had to refocus our families and family time. It seems like we checked that box off 2 months ago, and now it's still continuing to fill in the gaps. So just to go back to revisiting some of those things, you think of some of the freshness
mentioned about pulling your phones away or having a phone location and things of that nature, and that detox, that reset, and to continue to look for ways of those family experiences, so the kids our children are interacting with us, they're interacting with one another, and to facilitate those as best we can. I think we've each in our own families have those specific things we know that really help our relationships grow with one another, and I think that's the Lord's still trying to teach us something, in my opinion, of how we can cope and respond and interact with one another.
Good. Did I see another hand up? Maybe there. Do we have the microphone that we might be able to offer that? Just if that's okay. Not everybody loves a microphone.
I was just going to say, as far as the creativity and trying to get them off the screen, something struck me was that yesterday when we got together with some family friends, my kids weren't allowed, to have their tablets. They weren't going to do anything on their phones, and they started playing like live action Among Us, and they each had a character and they each had a role, and I don't know exactly.
Just keep the knives out of it, right? Yeah,
right,
that's
right.
good. Yeah.
Each person was a character, and
right.
They were doing, things like in person.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. I've never played Among Us, but I'm like, what are you guys doing? They're like, we're playing
So you got to watch some live action. In fact, my son Cole, my fifth grader, he said, "Yeah, Dad, we were playing IRL Among Us." You know what that is? In real life Among Us. So I was like, "Good job, dude. Nice." Yeah. Good. Yeah, they're marvelously creative if we just give them a chance. Any other thoughts? I don't think that mic was working. It is.
Test.
All right, good. Any other ideas? Yes. Do you mind using the microphone?
Oh, where?
Right here. Raise your hand. Oh, you didn't. It was just a hair flip. Oh, it was you faked me out. All right. Well, please, I want to honor your time, your night. It's still warm out, right? So thankful that I could be here. Pastor, do you want to come up and do a closing? That would be fabulous. Friends, again, this is an overwhelming amount of information. I understand that. And so as you walk away, as you get into the week here, if anything else comes up, you can reach out to us anytime, ask us questions. Myself or Michelle or Doug, somebody from the team will get back to you the best that we can. But just take it one step at a time. Maybe in your brain you've said, oh my gosh, I have all these 10 things I have to do. No, you don't. No, you don't. You have one thing this week. Pick one thing. Maybe this is the week that you just take a look at your router. That's it. That could be overwhelming enough. And then you can check that box. And if you can't figure it out, then ask your teen son or daughter to help you. They will, okay? And then check that one off and go to the next thing. But if you try to do it all at once, you will fail. Protect Young Eyes wants to help, so let us know how we can do that. Have a good night.
Let's thank Chris. Thanks. Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you for encouraging us to continue the conversations and for helping us fill our toolkit with the resources that we need to parent this day. And we're very thankful for a community, a church and school community, and other parents that we get to walk alongside of, and I hope we get to continue these conversations as a church and school family going forward, and how we get to implement a lot of these resources that we've had today. So thanks for that. I'd love to say a prayer for you, for your continued ministry, and for all of us here and watching tonight. If that's all right, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Almighty God, Father in heaven, you are the Lord of life, and you have created us that we would have abundant life in you. And yet, Lord, we know there are so many things that would rob us of life, of the joy of life, of the joy of relationships, and of your work within us. Lord, we thank you for raising up guides like Chris and like his team at Protect Young Eyes and others, Lord, who help us navigate so many of the dangers, the pitfalls, and the ways that we've really made a mess of your creation, Lord. You know how dark the darkness is. You know the inclination of our hearts. And yet, because of your great love and mercy for this world that you made, you sent your Son Jesus to be our Savior. And we thank you for the hope, for the life, for the forgiveness, and the redemption we have in him. Lord, may we be people of grace. May we also be people of wisdom. And pray that you'd continue to give us that wisdom as we live lives that give you honor and glory and care for the people that you've entrusted to us. Lord, continue to be with Chris. Give him the joy of serving you. Strengthen him, Lord. Give him that endurance and strength and a great measure of your Spirit as he invests in children and families and the next generation, Lord. We just ask your hand of blessing to be upon him, his family, and protect young eyes as well. Be with us as we go our separate ways tonight, Lord, and be in our conversations. Be in our minds, our thoughts, our homes, and our hearts, and continue to lead and guide us. We pray this all in the name of your Son, our Savior, Jesus Christ. And all God's people said, Amen. We're glad to make this available on our YouTube channel and hope you guys get to maybe watch or rewatch that and continue those conversations. So thanks again.